Call to order, City Commission meeting of Tuesday, October 9th, 2018. Let the record show that all commissioners are present. First item is the order of business. Mrs. Carlson, are there any changes to the order of business?
Thank you, President Decker. Just a couple minor ones. Number 5, engineering, will be presented by Jan, the city attorney. And then number 11, under commission, the Dickinson Downtown Square project update is not an executive session. It's open.
Okay.
That would be all.
Okay, any questions for Mrs. Carlson on the changes? Hearing none, I'd look for a motion on the amended order of business.
So moved.
We have a motion to approve the
Second.
amended order of business and a second. Any further discussion or questions?
Mr. President, are we, in regards to the downtown, square project, sorry. In regards to the Dickinson Downtown Square project update, are we not discussing negotiations for that? Is that why? Because I know that would constitute for executive session. So are we not discussing that?
My personal, I think we need to have it out in the open, how we feel as commissioners, what's going to be appropriate if we're going to, and that'll come up.
Okay, we can wait.
I just think it needs to be in the open where we all sit.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you.
If I may offer, Mr. President,
Yep.
Commissioner Tustum, if the commission starts talking and decides that, hey, we want to go that route because it is a regularly scheduled meeting, you can still go into executive session if you want to.
Okay, any other questions, discussion? All in favor of approving the amended order of business, state aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. The order of business amended is approved. Consent agenda. Is there anything on the consent agenda commissioners would like to discuss with staff? If not, I'd look for a motion on the consent agenda.
So moved.
We have a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Any further discussion on consent? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Consent agenda motion is approved. We have one timetable item at 5 o'clock, so we'll get right into the administrative and finance. And the first item up is Vanguard Agreements, the market reval for 2024. Mr. Hirschfeld.
Mr. President, Commissioners, thank you. As we tabled last meeting, brought before you today the difference between the contract that we had for the 2015 revaluation and the one that's proposed for 2024. There is some inflationary increase in the per parcel costs, but I wanted to point out the big difference was the increase in the number of parcels, specifically to the small commercial count, which went from 864 to 1,580 parcels, so almost twice as many commercial properties will be valued as what we estimated in 2011 for the 2014 valuation. And another 10 or so large commercial properties, and then not quite half again as many vacant lot parcels has been estimated. That would be the reason for the total dollar estimate to be higher or significantly higher than what it was for the 2015 revaluation. If you have any questions, I'm open to any of those.
Any questions for Mr. Hirschfeld?
Mr. President, Ms. Carlson, when we do appraisals such as these, what funding source does that usually come from?
The last one came from out of the 0.5% tax,
Okay.
sales tax. But we can look at where we need to look at it as far as the budget goes.
Okay.
We'd almost want to start budgeting now, right?
Yeah.
Correct. Yep. And as I showed those revenue projections and that forecasted during our budget process, then we can look in there and see where we can start earmarking funds for this.
Thank you.
Because depending on the makeup of this commission in 6 years, we don't want to just place them with a $670,000 bill
Right.
that year. So if we can,
Mr. President,
yes.
Mr. Hirschfeld, of the 8 largest cities in North Dakota, how many of them are still with Vanguard?
Commissioner Steiner, that's a very good question. I don't have that information off the top of my head. I don't believe Fargo has Vanguard. I believe, I know Minot does, I believe Bismarck does, Mandan does, and they continue to increase their footprint in North Dakota. I haven't been made aware of them losing any customers, but they're, of course, significantly more tax directors and small assessors for the counties than there are large cities.
Do you think it, find out who they are and maybe ask for competitive bids, or think about maybe a competitive bid?
We certainly can. I know there was another company, Tyler Inc., that was in the state. They had one county, I believe it was Stutzman County. It's certainly something I can do, is go to the national trade shows, been to the local and regional shows, and that's all that was being represented there. But I do want to kind of expand out and maybe go to the IAAO show next year and just kind of see what else is out there, see if anybody's willing to come to North Dakota, to Dickinson, besides just coming and doing a job. They, of course, would have to have their appraisers licensed up here, and that may not be something they're willing to do, but certainly could hold that conversation with some other individuals.
And I don't know if this is out of line, because like you said, it's 2015 compared to what they estimate 2024, and with inflation, with the increased parcels and so on, it may be right in line.
Certainly.
Any other questions for Mr. Hirschfeld? We can certainly entertain the idea of putting it out on RFP. But that would probably delay this. You said up to, when is the show?
It will be next September.
Okay, so that basically delays it a year.
And the other item to remember is they were squeezing us in a year ahead of where they're scheduling now for 2024. They actually have 2025 filled. So we run that risk of losing our spot there and being another year, it would be 2 years later then.
Well, I think we need to have this done sooner than later. This reval. Well, I mean, we're having a reval already, but a complete,
Mr. President, if I may, and Mr. Hirschfield, I apologize, but there is another factor that affects the workload of our office.
Yes, Attorney Murtha. I was going to bring up the next bit of information. We are losing our residential appraiser. He's been with us 5 years, has 12 years worth of experience that he will be taken away from here, and so that leaves a gaping hole in our office right now, just trying to not only replace that experience, but replace everything that he was doing for us as well. And we've got 5 out of a 6 or 7 year study, or that residential revaluation that's complete. So that project's not complete yet at this time either. So we'll have to find a way to finish that job up as well.
okay. Well, thank you for the information.
I mean, I guess I look at this, 9 years, and I mean, the increase seems, for 9 years, I mean, the increase seems pretty realistic. I mean, they're also projecting out what their expenses are going to be in 2024 too.
Well, and
the
increased amount of parcels. And does this lock us in? Does this contract lock us into those parcels? Because we're probably going to add.
The contract is for the per parcel.
Okay,
cost.
just for the per
And
parcel.
so as we add
Parcels,
then certainly they'll.
So
will
we could even figure of it having a bill approaching 700,000 with added.
Well, and it certainly depends on how much growth, because as I go back and look at the initial estimate of 286,000 for the last one, if I remember correctly, we came in closer to 380,000 with all the new growth. So if we have another high growth year, a couple of growth years like we did in the last boom, it could be significantly more even than 700,000.
Well, my personal feeling is that we need to lock this in so we're on their calendar.
I would agree with that. If you're looking for a motion, I'll make that motion.
We have a motion to approve the contract with Vanguard.
Second.
With a second, any further discussion or questions for Mr. Hirschfeld or staff?
The only thing is, I wouldn't, if you go to that meeting, I would still check. I mean, for after 2024, maybe there's, it doesn't hurt to have a couple options going forward, but.
I agree wholeheartedly with you, Commissioner Frederick.
Okay, any other questions or comments? We'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion is approved for the agreement with Vanguard. Ms. Hirschfeld, you have a report.
I do have a report for you, just kind of an update of what's going on in the assessing office. Well, we already touched on the bad news that we had, losing Jeremy Farrar. He's going to be missed. And some good news, if you will, the North Dakota Supreme Court has returned a decision on the Sierra Ridge Apartments. They returned that back to the district court for Sierra Ridge and their attorneys not having noticed the state tax department. So they'll argue that it's a technicality. You've probably seen some other property owners reference that, but that's been consistent through some of the other properties we have and even throughout some of the other jurisdictions. I know Williams County had a couple of properties in the same boat that were returned for that, so that is one abatement that's failed, and there's certainly many more ahead of us.
So, Mr. President, so that's based on a technicality? It's not the merits of the case?
What was argued at the Supreme Court wasn't at district court for Sierra Ridge, was that they did not give timely notice to the state tax department. So they didn't notice Ryan Rauschenberger, who is the state tax rep. And there was a lot of consideration was given to that. There was a lot of good argument giving. I mean, in my opinion, I wish they would have just ruled on it. I think we were fine. But it kind of was a simple, easy way to say, well, they didn't follow protocol. They didn't do what the law stated they had to do. And it was returned for that reason. The State Board of Equalization, I was there for the second meeting. The open hearing is in August. On September 24th is when the state staff made their recommendation. The state board elected to accept the state staff's recommendation on all the properties that were presented at the State Board of Equalization. That ended up being a mixed bag, and there was a lot of inconsistencies this year as compared to prior years, which just adds confusion to what we do. In regards to Mr. Royal's properties, if you remember, we increased the value of one of them. The state staff did the same. There was another property that we made no change to that the state decreased, and then another one that we decreased that the state staff returned back to what the original assessed value was. Mr. Royal elected not to send one of his properties down there and contest it, so I'm assuming he thought that property was valued correctly. And then on a couple of the others of Mr. Royal's, they were decreased. All of Mr. Clement's were decreased. Mr. Clement did not provide us any information for the income approach. Last year, state staff said, or elected to make no change to Sierra Ridges for not participating. However, this year they did a 180 and elected to decrease all of Mr. Clement's properties, even though he didn't assist us in our income approach to value. So just kind of all over the place from the State Board of Equalization this year, and not a lot of guidance right now on how to proceed for next year. There were some good comments came from the governor, and I hope that in their upcoming meetings, I think they meet monthly or every other month, that some of this gets clarified as we go into next year's valuation period. And then wanted to update you and remind you that on November 6th, we will be hearing the abatements for Carlos Royals properties on the 2017 valuation. And I wanted to extend an invitation for the board as a whole or individually or small groups. If you wanted to come sit down with me, we could certainly go over how properties are valued, what the abatement process is going to be like, and just extend that invitation to you. And I guess this time I'll entertain any questions that you have in regards to our update.
Any questions for Mr. Hirschfeld? I think providing the commission with some information on the abatement process is helpful. So hopefully commissioners will take you up on that offer. Anyone else? Any questions for Mr. Hirschfeld? Comments?
Mr. Hirschfeld, how long of a meeting would that be? Say you met with 2 commissioners at a time.
It can make it a half hour, or if you have some certain aspects of it that you have questions on, or I mean I can make it an all-day affair, just however much time that you have, or if we do a couple of short ones and you still have questions, I can sit down one-on-one after that with somebody for as long as it takes for them to feel comfortable with what the assessing department does.
Well, I think it'd be a good idea to sit down with you and at least see where you're coming from. I know in the past it's been helpful, so I don't know how you want to do that. If you want us to just get a hold of you sometime and let you know when we can come in, or
We can certainly do that. If you're, as a board, you're interested, if you want to set a date now or even at next meeting, or we can certainly do that as well. And that would be starting to get pretty tight. I think the last week or 2 of October would be a good time. It would still be fresh enough for the November 6th abatement hearing. And as the phone calls are coming into my office now, that may not be the last hearing we have this year. So.
Well, commissioners, I guess I know you're all pretty busy. I would say reach out to Mr. Hirschfeld, and Mr. Hirschfeld, if the times kind of align, maybe we can then set up a group item that can be run through staff, and it might have to be on an individual basis or 2 at a time if the schedule allows. So, but thank you for the information and the opportunity. So.
Mr. President, Commissioners, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Moving to item B, we have the ordinance to amend the City of Dickinson pension and other employees' pension plan. City Attorney Murtha.
Deputy Decker, members of the commission, this is the second reading to approve ordinance number 1663 relating to changes to the police and main employees' pension plans that required for IRS rule compliance. I don't believe there were any questions last time, so I'll keep it short and be happy to answer any questions this time.
Okay, any questions for Mrs. Murtha on the ordinance to amend the city pension plan for police and the employee pension plans for the IRS update? And if I'm correct, we had the public hearing at the first reading. So any questions on ordinance 1663? Hearing no questions, I'd look for a motion on 1663.
move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion to approve with a second. Any further questions or comments for Mrs. Murtha or staff? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion is passed on ordinance 1663. Mrs. Murtha, you have a restatement of city defined contribution plan.
I do. President Decker, members of the commission, this second item is included in the group, and for the same reasons that the changes to the code required. It was actually, the restatement was prepared in 2014, as indicated on the front. It was redone by, again, our outside consultant. It was for IRS compliance to update certain provisions. It was something that at the time we had indicated to the IRS that we would do. And again, this was one that hadn't been done when it should have at that time. So we do need a resolution to approve the restatement. It was included at this time because as it's a resolution, it didn't need 2 readings. It just needs 1 approval. And once these items are completed, we'll be able to contact our outside consultant, provide them with the final materials, and then have them assist us with participation in the VCP program so that the IRS accepts these changes at this time. And I would be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, any questions on Resolution 26-2018? Hearing no questions, I'd look for a motion on 26-2018.
Move to approve, Mr. President.
We have a motion to approve
Second.
with a second. Any further questions or comments for Mrs. Murtha or staff? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion is approved for 26-2018. Mrs. Murtha, you have any PERS defined benefit, public safety retirement and 457 plans. This will be a resolution.
It is, and thank you, President Decker, members of the commission. And I'll just say this with regards to the 457. It's actually, that language isn't included in the language of the resolution. It's not required to be passed by resolution. You'll find next to some example agreements with regards to the 457 plan. That is something that is just an option for the city to, that is available to the city once you participate in NDPER. So it was kind of just to let you know that it's included in the group. Having a resolution saying that the city affirms participation in the NDPERS plan is required as part of the NDPERS application process. They actually have very specific language. So if you feel like the resolution is somewhat awkwardly worded and looks different than you normally see them, I specifically say under, for example, affirming that the City of Dickinson is neither a nonprofit corporation nor a for-profit corporation. Under sub 2 down below, that the motion to approve this resolution was made by and was seconded by, that's in the resolution. It's not something that's normally structured this way. The reason for it is that NDPERS requires a very specific format for the resolutions to join these plans. And so awkward as it is, that is why the language is what it is. So we're submitting it here for your approval. Once, or assuming the resolution passes, and it's provided to NDPERS, that then gives the city the ability to join the plans and start the process of signing the agreements and getting the paperwork done necessary to enroll employees beginning in 2019.
And this, if approved, we will enroll employees January 1st, 2019.
That is actually not up to us. So
Okay.
the goal is to have all the paperwork to NDPERS in time so that they can onboard us in 2019. However, if we don't, or even if we make their deadlines, but they on their end I know that they are also onboarding other municipalities at this time. If they say they need more time, they will tell us that, and then we will be onboarded essentially at the state's convenience. It goes by month. So if we miss January 1, it would be February 1 and so forth.
Okay. Any questions on Resolution 27-2018? Hearing no questions, I'd look for a motion.
Mr. President, I move that we approve resolution number 27-2018.
We have a motion to approve with a second. Any further questions for Mrs. Murtha or comments? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion passes to approve 27-2018. And we move on to item C, Mrs. Murtha, City Administrator Contract.
Thank you, President Decker, members of the commission. With regards to the city administrator contract, this is here for your approval. It is and for the benefit of those in the audience, it was previously public information, but Mr. Gah was extended an offer for the position of city administrator. This contract represents the negotiated terms of that employment arrangement. He has agreed to these terms, therefore it is here for your review, comment, and approval. And assuming it is approved, Mr. Gah should begin with the City of Dickinson on November 26th.
Okay, any questions on the City Administrator contract for Mrs. Murtha or staff? Hearing no questions, I'd look for a motion on the City Administrator contract.
Move to approve, Mr. President.
Second.
A motion to approve with a second. Any further questions or comments on the City Administrator contract? Hearing none, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion to approve the contract for Mr. Gah is approved. And next item up is an item I guess we'll be kind of handling with our discussion for with Deputy City Administrator Carlson, and some of the items that I brought up last meeting is compensation for Mrs. Carlson and her original agreement with past administrator. And what I'm looking to suggest is, because of what was promised a couple years, 2 years ago, 3 years ago?
2 years.
2 years ago, what was promised and has not come to fruition, but I would look to the commission to approve a pay raise starting January 1 of next year of 108, that she would go to 118,000 from her current position, and then 6 months after that, a 2% bump, according to what other exempt city employees are getting, at 2%, if she's agreeable to that.
I'm agreeable to that. Thank you, President Decker.
What was the original agreement?
When I started at 1015, and then because of my years of experience, I had asked in my 2 performance evaluations to be bumped up concerning my years of experience, and I met the goals that was asked of me. And it was supposed to be last year, and then with the revenue, it was asked to wait, and then it was supposed to be this August, and we lost an administrator in May.
And it was never brought to our attention that what they were.
Thank you.
Mrs. Murtha?
President Decker, there's just one other caveat to that. Currently, City Administrator Carlson has an increased salary due for her interim duties, and at this time, or as part of this discussion, if the commission could indicate at what point that should go, at what point the interim salary should go, and then what it should go back down to.
My personal feeling is she's, because of the training that's going to take place with the new administrator, she should stay at this interim salary till the end of this year, and then she'll effectively go to this new rate January 1. if the commission's agreeable.
I'm okay with that.
I think that'd be fair.
Okay.
Appreciate that, Commissioner.
So I guess I would look for a motion on what I just constructed.
Mr. President, I would move that we approve the pay raise on January 1 for Mrs. Carlson at $118,000 with a 6-month 2% increase. And I would move that we continue to pay her through the interim until December 31st.
Couldn't have put it better myself, so.
Second.
I wrote it.
We have a motion to approve the pay raise for Mrs. Carlson with a second. Any further discussion or questions? Now we'll vote. Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion is approved.
Thank you.
And we have a 5 o'clock public hearing. And that is the demolition of some property on Block 9 of Messerschmitt and Simpson addition. And Mr. Schwint, you'll be handling this.
Yes, President Decker, Commissioners. What I'm looking for this evening is consideration of the City of Dickinson Commission to deem the structure located at 523 DuPont Street, Dickinson, North Dakota, as a dangerous building, a public nuisance, and be scheduled for demolish per recommendation of the City of Dickinson Building Department. What I have here are some slides. We've been working on the property. Our records go back prior to 2014. The owner of the property passed away in 2015. Since then, the property has been sitting idle. Here are some exterior photos of the property. Exterior plant growth, tree growth, blocking public sidewalks. And the issues have escalated over the years. So you can about imagine. It was brought to our attention in August that the front door was actually kicked in. So that brought even more attention to our department. So what we went there and staff went over, we essentially suited up to take some of these interior photos. We stayed in as minimal amount of time as we can because of the odor of the property. So our staff is asking that you deem this property as a public nuisance, and we'd move forward with the process.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Schwint?
Mr. Swint, has anybody been notified in relationship to the owner?
We have contacted the county, and with the county, we've sent out notices. There really is no one that has come forward. Looking at the property, I don't know that somebody would want to claim this. It's substantial work that you'd have to do in order to comply with the code.
Were the taxes paid up to
The
date?
taxes are not currently paid. They'll go default next year at this time.
As long as we got our T's crossed and I's dotted, I think we got to do it. It's a hazard. But we got to make sure so in 6 months someone doesn't come back and say we tore down a home that didn't go proper yet. So
Okay, any other questions for Mr.
So
Schwint?
it's 4 years before they take it back on back taxes? It's 4 years? That was
Act-
2.
Actually, the taxes would be due, I believe, in June of next year. And at this time, no one's come forth, and there really is no forwarding address. I've talked with the county. It's just sitting there.
No next of kin.
There was no estate, or?
No.
So at that time, the lot could be bought by anybody.
It could.
Because we're going to have a vacant lot there.
It could. However, with this particular lot, there's issues with this lot. At some point in time, this lot was actually divided. So if this structure were to be taken down, it's really an unbuildable lot because of the square footage of the lot.
Any other questions for Mr. Schwint? Not, I'd look for a motion.
Mr. President, I move we approve demolition.
We have a motion to approve demolition
Second.
with a second. Any further questions or comments?
It just says public hearing on here. Do we have to have a public hearing? I,
Okay, no, I did not say that, so I will just hold the motion and then we'll go to the public hearing for the demolition of this property located at Block 9 of Messerschmitt and Simpson Addition. If you have any concerns or comments about the demolition of this property, please come forward. Anyone from the public? Hearing no one from the public has any concerns, I will close the public hearing. This time we have a motion to approve the demolition by Mr. Steiner with a second from Mrs. Truscombe. Any other questions or comments? Go ahead and vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mrs. Truscombe?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion to approve the demolition is approved. We have a 505 presentation by Senator Rich Wardner on the hub formula funding.
Thank you. Where do I point? Well, good evening, City Commission and Mr. Chairman. I would appreciate the opportunity to talk about the infrastructure bill. It's called the Operation Prairie Dog. You have a document in front of you. I will, it's not the same as the presentation, but I will let you know what page you should be on. That is yours to keep so that you can take a look at how the oil money is distributed in the state of North Dakota. This particular bill is critical to this community. It's about hub city funding. And I want to tell you that we started out studying hub city funding because it was put into a study by the legislature, by legislators who felt that the hub cities had gotten enough. You got the surge, you're getting too much money, and you don't need it. And so as we were going along, we had people from our committee here in Dickinson, in Williston, and in Minot. However, even after that, there were those that were complaining that they didn't get anything. And we're talking about people in the other areas of the state, which I would call the non-oil counties, cities, and townships. And so I started to realize in May that I'd better do something, or we weren't going to get our funding. And it's critical to this community, and especially to Williston. Williston has debt. We have debt. We have to pay that debt. And the debt was occurred because of the energy impact from the oil and gas development in our area. And so this idea of the infrastructure bill was conceived. I call it the Project Prairie Dog, and it's simply because prairie dogs do a great job of building infrastructure, and as you'll notice out here as you go to Medora, they jump the park, they're in the ditch, and they're going under I-94. So they know how to do infrastructure, so it's just a name that I gave it. My first thing would be you should be on page 3, on page 1 and 2. That is a lead-in. That tells you about how some of the thinking was important to other legislators. But first of all, the assumptions. These assumptions are just a place where we can check if the assumptions are, or if the actual funding or the barrels of production and the price per barrel is more, we will get more than what is shown here when we get to it. So we had to use something, so we have a baseline. And the assumption is $1.2 billion barrels, or 1.2 million barrels per day, and a price of $52.50. Now, that is a very, very conservative. So the numbers that you see on this for our community and the oil communities in western North Dakota, they're probably going to be better in reality. And remember, this thing starts July 1 of next summer. So we're predicting out there ways, but all the forecasting that we've had, this is lower than any that we've had. So we feel good about it, that it's going to be better. You're on page 3, and I want you to know that there are two taxes in the oil patch, and there's the extraction tax and the gross production tax. Both of them are 5%. And this is the total amount of revenue that would be projected under the assumptions that were given. That's $4.4 billion from all of the oil taxes collected out in the patch. Now I'm just going to go through the extraction tax real quick. There you have the amount, $2.2 billion. When you come down, we got to take this part out here for Fort Berthold. We take the state and the tribal out. The tribal part here and the tribal part over here on the gross production tax is collected by the state and remitted back to the tribes, just like it is remitted to us from the state treasurer's department. The other one is the gross production tax, and that's the one that we're going to concentrate on tonight. That is a 5% tax. You might say, why is that one a little bit more than this one? That's because some wells are called stripper wells or low producing wells out there, and we only charge gross production tax. We do not charge an extraction tax on those. So as we come down, we split into these two, but this is the one where we're concerned about that the political subs get in lieu of property tax from. And it was never set from the beginning in 1950s. So there's been a fight and a tug and pull between the political subs in the oil country and the state from the get-go. And it continues today. We're hoping that this bill is the end. Our big goal is will be no sunset clause, so that everybody knows where they're at. And so everybody's looking forward to that. Okay, now this one, I'm going to go through the extraction tax over here on this side first quickly. On your copy, that would be page 6, and it's done a little bit different. I'm not going to go through the way it is there, but what you need to see is where the monies go. The extraction tax has nothing to do with the money that comes back to oil and gas counties. You do need to know that 30% of the extraction tax goes into the legacy fund. That's going to be $596.4 million. The tribes get their share, $219 million. Then we have the Resources Trust Fund. You need to know that this is where we get the money to help build out Southwest Water. This is 20%. 20% of the extraction tax goes into the Resources Trust Fund. That is for water projects across the state, and of course you need to know that everybody shares in that across the state, and of course it's been important to us. We have water here in Dickinson, and this fund has been very important, so it's oil that has been responsible for that. Then these other two are school funds. I will just mention the common schools. That's one that helps keep property taxes down, because the earnings from that are now $365 million. I'll say that again, $365 million per biennium that goes into the school funding that helps keep property taxes down. And we're always concerned about all of the political subs and what they have to levy for property taxes, and that is continuing to go up, and that's a lot of money that we don't have to worry about. Foundation aid, that's another school fund. What it does is keep schools. The schools weren't cut when we cut the last biennium, when we had to cut budgets, they weren't cut because this fund kept them whole. I'm not going to go into it any more than that. And then we have the Oil and Gas Research Fund over there on that side, and that is responsible for research and getting more oil out of the Bakken Shale. Then you have the state fund, and I want you to keep an eye on that because you'll see that comes up later again. This goes to the state buckets. You've heard that word, the state buckets. That's where it goes. All right, now over here we have the gross production tax. You should turn to page 4. This is a review, and then we'll get into page 4 a little bit more. Legacy, whoops, there we go. Legacy Fund will get $613.5 million. The tribes get their $208.5 million. The Outdoor Heritage gets 28.1. Reclamation, 14.1. Outdoor Heritage is a fund where the Crooked Crane Trail is an example. It came out of that particular fund. And there's money all across the state of North Dakota and places where this money has been invested. It's a quality of life thing, and it helps put habitat out there from one end of the state to the other. And then the reclamation, we have wells in some part of the state that are old legacy wells, they're called, and they're causing problems. And this is to help clean them up, and that's what it's there for. And then this is the part we're going to dig into. This is where we fall in. Political subs in lieu of property tax, and then you have the state gets money through the gross production tax that goes to the buckets. So this goes to the buckets, and this will go to the buckets. Now, this one's on there just so you know what happened. This is the way it was. There are two streams of money that in the gross production tax. We call this the 1% of the 5%, and this one is called the 4%. The 1% was always the state's money, but we stuck things in there. The legislature did. We stuck hub cities in there. We stuck hub city schools. We had money for schools in the counties that help keep them whole. And we had the impact funds in there. This was a target, and many legislators didn't like this. This is where they zeroed in on us. Why are we getting money out of there? That's why we had to get out of there. That's what put us in trouble. We took those 4 and moved them over here, which you'll see in a minute. And I just, other than that, that's all that's for. I don't even have a page in your handout on this. So that was the thing we had to do. Now, political subs in lieu of property tax. I can't tell you how many times I've said that to legislators, but it's like water off of a duck's back. It really is. So as we take a look at this, here's what happened. This is the 4% stream. The first thing we did is we go down here. The way it's been written the last few years is that the first $5 million in taxes that come under here, the 4%, and out of each county, the first $5 million stays in that county. It stays in there. And so that's what we did here. We took out the $5 million for each county. You got to understand that some counties don't even get $5 million. Stark gets $5 million. Not a lot more, but we get more. But if you're in McKenzie County, or if you're in Dunn County, or if you're in Montreal or Williams, you get a whole lot more than $5 million. So the first $5 million they get to keep. After that, we go to the percent, 70-30. And we tried to change the 70-30, and that was no go, because we'd have gotten a lot of more money, and they weren't hearing of that. I'm talking about other legislators that we bounced this off of. So what did we do for hub cities? Well, to make sure we kept them the same, we're going to take hub cities out before, just like the 5 million per county is taken out before you apply the 70-30, hub cities and hub city schools were taken out before. Now, just so you know, they're taken out on paper, but in reality, they get that money as you go along through the year. So you're not going to all of a sudden get that money, boom. You're not. And actually, it's a little better than when it was on the other side. Here, it's 25 million per year, and that's 50 million. So we felt we got a little bit extra money than what we, for the schools and the hub cities. The hub city schools and the hub cities got a little more money than they did over on the other side. So now, you add those up, and this 157 is subtracted off, and then we apply the 30/70. And so this is taken out, so it's kind of like state money. It's taken out ahead of time and not in the 30/70. All right, here we are. And we are bringing it back in, and you'll look at that. You say 157. This isn't 157. You didn't add it back in. You only added back in 140. See this down here? You add this up to that, and you get 157. What is this for? This is for a bunch of counties that didn't get the 5 million per year. Who are they? McHenry, Bottineau, Renville, Ward, Golden Valley, Slope. They didn't make it. McLean. So they have a different formula. Counties get 45%, cities get 20, and schools get 35, and it's the money that's in that county. So a school in a county, the county gets 45% of the money that's generated from oil taxes in that county. Cities get 20, schools get 35. This is why you'll see, I want you to concentrate on that. Schools is at 35, and we're going to go to this one. I'm going to go to my next slide. There you got 596.2. That's what we're going to take on and move over. This 140 was added back in. There it is. So now when we go to the, all right, now we're going to start putting the money to the areas. I want you to notice that the schools over here only got 5%. This does not include the hub city schools. Dickinson, Williston, and Minot are not in this. Well, if you're a school district and you're at 4.5 million, you're getting 35%. Then if you go over 5 million, you go to 5. They lose money. That's what this oil and gas school hold even is. Who would that affect? Well, it would affect Richardson and Taylor, South Hart, Belfield, and those schools. Has nothing to do with, and so we put it in over on this side. Now this is going to be called predetermined amount. This is hard money. They're going to get it. You'll see in a minute that hub city schools are there too, and we'll talk about that. And by the way, your mayor was in on every minute of the discussions. Did a great job, by the way. Now, the rest of the money there's 9 counties. There's 9 counties that get this money. Now, we say counties will get 60% of it. Keep in mind, not all the counties get an equal. It's where the production is. McKenzie County gets the most. Of that 318 million, most of it's going to McKenzie, Williams, Montreal, and Dunn. They're the big 4. Then you have Divide County, which drops way down, and they're kind of in the middle. And then you've got 4 counties that are like at 6-7 million per year. They're just over. They're Bowman, they're Burke, Stark, and Billings. So everybody was happy because this is exactly the way it was before, or like it is today in the bill that we passed last session. I want you to know that we tried a whole lot of things before we finally got back to this. There were a lot of people involved in finding a way to get this done so that everybody was happy. Now, this is what we're interested in. Over here, hub cities, predetermined amount. Why is this so important that you have some of it that is solid money? Because if the price of oil goes down, this will keep Dickinson, Williston, and Minot from tanking. This protects us. If the price of oil goes down to $35 a barrel, this will stay the same. Over here, this will change. But if we'd had it all over here, which we had a plan of doing, then when the price went down, we'd have really went down. So this is really important. And I know that Mayor Decker talked about that. He thought it was important, and so did the other mayors. And so that part right there is solid. This over here is on that percent side. 9% of the oil monies go in the formula come to the hub cities. Now I want to just make mention of those coefficients or percentages. Williston is at 58.5, Dickinson at 28.3, 13.2 for Minot. They have to do with the employment numbers in oil in the city. They have to do with oil employment numbers in the region. It has to do with oil production in the region. It has to also do with the number of oil companies in the community.
And
I want you-
it was important that we had a floor. And
Pardon?
Yeah. It was important that we had a floor.
Yeah, and this provides a floor. And so if anybody wants to know why is Williston at 58.5 and Dickinson at 28.3 and Minot at 13.2? Because we used national data to come there. And by the way, just so you know, it was kind of fun. It's kind of fun to be just sitting there, kind of neutral. And we had the mayors and the city people from each committee or each community there, and we hammered it out. It was nose to nose for a while. Now Dickinson, they relaxed because theirs never changed. But these other two, you make a few adjustments, theirs changed. And so we finally got a consensus, and that's what we're going with. And so what is good for the hub cities is good for the hub city schools. So Williston not only gets 25.5 out of the solid money, but they're going to get another 29 million out of the formula. Dickinson is going to get 12.4, and they're going to get 13.5. Minot's going to get 5.8 and 6.3. And then here's our hub city schools. They also get some hard money. And then they got some percent money over here. I will just tell you, we tried to put in an infrastructure fund. Money that they could use for building didn't go. Because we had too many people in other parts of the state that said, that's not fair. And so I said, well, we're getting it out of this bill, we're going to argue it someplace else. Doesn't mean we're done with it, but we're not going to argue it here. Now, there you can see what, if you use the assumptions of 1.2 million barrels a day, $52.50 a barrel as an average next biennium, here's what Williston will get: 54.8 million. And ladies and gentlemen, they got way over $300 million in debt. There's Dickinson, 25.9. There's Minot, 12.1. Please keep in mind that if the price of oil averages more, and if the barrels are more, Dickinson will get more. Dickinson will get more, and so will Williston, and so will Minot. Here's the schools. This money will then go into the formula. By the way it's set up, this oil money, 25% of it does not go into the funding formula for per pupil payments. The other 75 does. We were hoping to keep some of it out of that, but too many people complained. So that is really what is important, and it shows it on one of your, see, I guess, page 5 and 7. 5 and 7. Oh, no, I guess not. It's all on 5. Now I'm gonna move, just for your own legacy, we'll get 1.2 million the next biennium on those projections. We're not here to talk about the legacy. I'd like to, but I won't. Now here's the bucket bill. I want you to know this is what, there's something in here for us, but there's also, this is what saved our Hub City money. Because we set out to say, all right, everybody kept telling me around the state, hey, we got needs too. We need help. We got infrastructure that needs, so that's why we came up with this. By the way, here are the buckets. General fund gets 200 million. County social services, we plan to continue to fund that. That's 200 million, and that's 200 million. And then the next one that fills is our budget stabilization. That's our rainy day fund. We spent it dry, and we're building it up again. General fund, again, 200 million. So that's all we put into our general fund will be 400 million out of oil money. Then we got the lignite research. Then we got the disaster relief. You might say, well, yeah, I see you got a cap of 220 million, and how come you don't have put any money in? Because it has more money than that in it. And we changed the cap and brought it down. So we don't think there'll be any money. All of the cities in non-oil, in other words, all the cities outside of the 9 oil counties. If you live in McLean or Ward or Renville or Bottineau, where they do have some oil, they still are considered non-oil, and they will get this 115 million will be divided. We have a formula for that. They all seem to be happy with it. But that made a difference, folks. That made a big difference. Then for the counties, they get, and townships, they get 115 million. 15 million goes to the townships, and it's divided equally to all those that can receive the money. The other 100 million goes to counties. And the county money is divided up by the Upper Great Plains Transportation Institute's needs study. They're all agreed to that. But the one that's been added to is this airport infrastructure. See that 50 million? Well, in the bill, it says up to 20 million is for the Dickinson Airport, the first biennium. That's huge that we got that taken care of. And then in the future, this money is important for the state aeronautics to be able to match federal dollars that come to the state of North Dakota. We've got airports that need work too. And so not everybody likes this, but they're starting to change their mind. Leadership in the House didn't really care for that. And then you still have some money left in the bottom bucket. So when you hear the Strategic Infrastructure and Improvement Fund, the word fund isn't on there. You ever hear the word SIF? That's what they're talking about. It's this bottom bucket. There's still money there to help with the state highway department, the DOT. There's money to help in other areas. So sometimes we need it all. This particular biennium will need it all. By the way, I want you to know that before we spend this is cash. We don't spend this on the come, we spend it at the end. This is not so much for you out here in oil country. This is for the non-oil. It has to be on infrastructure, and we define it because that's what they were complaining about. And I want you to know that it's not property tax relief to them, but it will make a difference in their property taxes going forward because they won't have to levy property taxes to fix roads. I'm just going to give you, here's the cities. So you want to know? It has to do with their population. It has to do with the valuations in their cities. It has to do with the number of people they have in their city. And then the ones that have a lot of people, this is a density factor here. It's really what it is. It's a density factor. I'm not going to go into it, but I want you to know that Fargo will get about 25 million. About a little less than what Dickinson will get. They have 123,000 people. They're by far the largest community in the state. There's what Bismarck will get. We only put a few up here. 16 million. I want to point out West Fargo. West Fargo gets 12.4. They get more money than Grand Forks. Grand Forks is 57,000 people. West Fargo is about 37,000 people. Why would they get as much as Grand Forks? Because they're one of the fastest growing communities in North Dakota. And that's a factor in the calculations. And then you can see that we got them grouped. There's only seven communities up here, and of course, the hub cities are not listed. There's a blank on them. There's no Dickinson, no Williston, no Minot. And then we got the next tier of cities, anywhere from 2,000 to 5,000, and we go down it. And that's just an example there. That's all I want to give you on that. I just want to make sure that you understand that this is probably greased and ready to go. I gave this presentation today to the counties. I've given it to the League of Cities. They all like it. Everybody's excited, and I'm relieved because we're going to be able to hold our hub city money. Up until we did that, it wasn't looking good. And I just want you to understand that what people were saying was true. They were saying it. Number one, they would say, you know, you got that surge money. That should have caught you up. That should have been enough. And then they started talking about the oil patch. You know, up there in McKenzie County, they got gas plants, they got pipelines, and they're getting all kinds of revenue off of that. I think we should take a look at cutting that 30% down to maybe 20. It was serious, commissioners. And so I am glad that a lot of people put a lot of work into this summer. And I think we can take a breath again. And I want you to know that right now it has support across the state. So that's exciting. With that, I'll answer any questions you may have.
Mr. President,
Mr.
Senator
Steiner.
Wardner, this commission and previous commissions, when it comes to budgeting time, not just at budgeting time, but all year long, we've been squeezing our budgets to get every ounce of fat out of it. I mean, we're thin. We're thin, our budgets. Last few years, we've paid down our debt from 100 million, probably down below 88 million, somewhere there. It almost feels like we could be penalized for being efficient. You know what I'm saying? Or are they saying, well, look what Dickinson did. They don't need this money anymore, even though we have squeezed so tight here. We've made it hurt. We haven't hired additional employees until this year. Previous years, we've gone skinny. You know, so I appreciate what you're doing. It looks like a great plan. I just hope those people understand that we still have the infrastructure in the ground. We still got $88 million worth of debt, and we're going to get more debt. And, you know, but we paid down $12 million the last couple of years here. You know, so
Well, thank you
for all your fighting.
Well, thank you for that. I'll tell you what, I always tell about our community. I said, you know, we were about 16 to 17,000 people. We were happy, and we were happy with our lagoons. Even if they stunk 3 weeks in the spring, we were happy. We didn't need anything. But when we went over 25 million, then we had to build a wastewater treatment plant, which cost, with all the different pipelines and stuff, well over $50 million, and we had debt from it. But I don't know, for some reason, some people have a hard time understanding that. And we've got a couple of legislators. They really resent the fact that Watford City built a brand new school and a brand new community center. They really resent the fact that Williston built a community center with sales tax, should have used that money for something else. You don't need those things. I'm telling you that if we're going to get workforce out here in the oil patch, we need to provide these quality of life issues or these people aren't coming. And so our community center is very valuable to this community. And what you guys have done, and you people, guys, ladies too, I don't want to exclude you, it's a general term, but I just want you to know, all of you, the planning and stuff that has gone on over the years, we are kind of a shining light out there. People do look to Dickinson and say, you know, they did it right, and it has happened. So keep up the good work, and yes, I'm with you. Pay that debt down as quickly as possible. But the big thing, you can rely on this money now because there will not be a sunset clause. If somebody tries to put it on, there will be a big fight. Big fight.
Well, I know I personally appreciate all the time that you've put into this. I know how tough this is, and I know how tough trying to change the mind of some of these legislators. It's almost impossible. They will argue that we don't really have an effect on the state, but I can just look at that, what you just put up there on the board, and how much money is distributed across the state for all these different projects. And oil does have a great impact to this whole state, regardless of what they think they're getting or not. And I know you're a fierce fighter, and Mrs. Steiner and Mr. LaFour, they're out there working every day to secure this, this bill for us, and I really appreciate the work and being allowed to be in the negotiation process, because it is interesting. There's much more to, and you know that. There's much more besides this bill. There's more issues out here, but this needs to be secured, and hopefully you guys can get a vote within the first month of the session. And I know if you ever need me down there, all you have to do is call, and I'm sure any of the other commissioners would be more than willing to go down and tell our story to the legislature.
Well, I know, Mr. Mayor, you've talked to some of those legislators, I know that. But when it comes time for the hearing, we're not taking anything for granted. We want as many people in there as we can. And as far as Representative Steiner and Representative LaFour, they got pretty bloody last session. They were over there in the pit dueling and getting things done, and so we appreciate it.
Yeah, they're working hard. We appreciate all your work.
Just a quick comment for the public's knowledge. I think it's important to note that we took $4.5 million of that funding to offset our costs in our general fund. So if we, as a community, were to lose that money, we would be in very, very serious trouble. So thank you for all your work and for being a champion, not only for this community, but for the other impacted schools, counties, and municipalities. So thank you.
Okay, well, thank you guys.
Thanks, Rich.
Okay, we'll proceed to item D. We have some reports on our hiring journal. Mrs. Nominuk.
Good evening, Mr. President, Commissioners. First off on our hiring journal is a police officer position. We did make an offer on that last position that we have open, and we are in the background phase on that. We had a corporal police officer internal opening recently. We are still in the interview process for that. The decision has not been made, finalized. Street and Fleet Operations Manager has been vacant for some time. We did open that position. We did do interviews recently and are reviewing our our applicants to determine if we're going to bring in for second interviews. Street Maintenance Operator, we had 3 openings for that. We have hired 2 so far for that. We had a Fleet Assistant a fleet services assistant position in our fleet department that was recently vacated. Had an offer made and accepted and just had it rescinded. She declined the offer just recently, so we're back to looking at our applicants again. We had a water utility operator position. We've had two openings. We had one filled. That person is already working for us, and then the other one we've had multiple offers and declines and offers and declines, so we're still working on that one. Wastewater treatment plant operator, we have one opening right now, and a verbal offer was just made today. Limited hour assistant, we've had a couple openings there, and I believe that we're good there. We just made an offer. We're in the background phase on the last opening for the library. Solid waste route operator, we had an opening there, and there too, an offer was just made verbally. We recently had a landfill operator leave, so that position was just open. That's not on your sheet yet. It was just open since this was sent out for your packets. And city administrator, you know where we're at with that. We have a verbal offer and contract going out. And as Mr. Hirschfeld told you, we have a property appraiser position that will be opened soon. And we have a deputy clerk of court position that's going to be open soon. So we're staying very busy.
Okay, thank you, Mrs. Nominick. Any questions?
Just one. The people that are declining our positions, what are we hearing for reasons? I mean, it seems like we're making a lot of offers and they're not taking them.
The one for the fleet services assistant, her current employer must have made her a deal she couldn't refuse, and she decided to stay there. The water utility operator, I don't know. I think they're finding other positions with that one. It took us a little while with the first one. We made an offer. We wanted to give him some time a couple days to let us know. Then he declined it, and then we moved down our list. And they've had other jobs in the meantime, and that's kind of where we're at with those. I don't think there's anything real specific.
So it's not like pay scale or?
I haven't really heard that. We've not had to negotiate higher pay with anyone yet. No.
Any other questions for Mrs. Nominick? Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Carlson, you have a thank you.
It was put into your packet. It's a thank you from Rough Rider Commission for the support that we gave them in the sponsorship. It's what we do each year with the grant money that we have. So it was just a thank you from them.
Moving along, we'll move on to engineering. There's nothing from public safety this evening. And the engineering will be handled by Mrs. Murtha.
President Decker, members of the commission, this, just a bit by way of background on this task order, as you're aware, the city had been involved in ongoing litigation with, in a matter with Ms. Perkel and Mr. Kubis, landowners, relating to their property and the impact of a private developer who built a pond in the subdivision that the city was involved in only kind of as a third party as the reviewer of the development. In case that litigation has concluded, there was a settlement agreement that was involved in that, and that has now been accepted and provided to the courts and finalized. But pursuant to the terms of that settlement agreement, the parties, and that would be the private developer as well as the city, agreed to take another look at the pond. And under the terms, the private developer is the one that is going to incur the cost of redoing the water drainage system, the pond and whatnot. But what the city did agree to do was to pay part of the fee to the engineering firm Apex that the city does have under general engineering contract services, and to split the fee with the private developer to have that pond relooked at and updated designs provided. And so this task order is that, and it is being submitted for your review and approval. It's a task order because, again, it's under the general contract that the city has with Apex Engineering. Throughout the development stage of the pond, and the Apex is very familiar with this area and very familiar with the development, so they don't anticipate a long time frame. But you'll note, and this is kind of an important part, that because you'll note under 5 task order schedule that the agreement is that Apex will only begin work when they receive 50% of the fee from the third party, from the private developer. And that's when they will commence work, and then the city will be responsible for the 50% at the end after the work is done. So the share that the city is not responsible for will be paid up front. And again, the time frame is dependent upon the payment by the private developer. So that's pretty much the highlight of it. But this, again, is being submitted to you and is part of that settlement agreement. So I would be happy to answer any questions you may have about this. And I'm sorry, I keep referring to it as a stormwater pond improvements. But I'd be happy to answer any other questions you may have about this matter.
Any questions for Mrs. Murphy?
No.
Hearing no questions, I'd look for a motion on this task order.
Move to approve, Mr. President.
We have a motion to approve
Second.
with a second. Any further questions, comments for Mrs. Murtha or staff?
Just, has the private developer offered a time frame when they'll send their payment, or?
They have not. And again, this task order was only presented to you at this time because we were waiting for finalization and acceptance of the settlement by the court. So they haven't indicated. That is something that they have their obligations under the settlement agreement, and I just assume leave between them and the plaintiffs.
All right.
Any further questions or comments from Mrs. Murtha on the Apex Pond Design Agreement? We have a motion to approve by Mr. Steiner with a second from Mrs. Trustum. Hearing no further questions or comments, we'll vote. Mr. Steiner?
Aye.
Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion is passed to approve the agreement. We have nothing for Public Works or planning this evening, no building codes. We will move into public issues of city concern not on the agenda. Anyone from the public wish to come forward? If they have any concerns they wish the commission to hear, please come forward. Seeing no one from the public has any issues of city concern, I'll close the public issues portion and move into the commission. Before, well, I guess we can start and I'll hold. We generally in this commission part, besides the executive session, if there's anything commissioners want to bring up, you're willing to bring up. I'll just say right now, let's hold that till the end and we'll discuss this, this Dickinson Downtown Square project update. And Mrs. Murtha, do you have any comment before we have our open discussion here?
My only comment upon on this item is just to give you just what's happened thus far, background, maybe to frame your discussion. There is a memorandum of understanding that has been drafted between the city and the Downtown Improvement District. That is the entity that has promised to raise the $2 million to put towards the town square under the terms that were verbally negotiated back when Mr. Kessel was here. The city would not have to expend any money on the town square until the $2 million had been raised, and at that time, that's when kind of the city obligations would kick in. A draft of this memorandum of understanding was provided to the downtown square task force. They have they've looked at it. It is it was provided at what was a bit ago? I think was it August or September? I can't. I'm looking to Mr. Hadley for September. And at that time, it was my understanding that the DID was going to have their council look at it. To date, I haven't received any comments back from it. It's not finalized. Once we get comments back from it, we will provide it to the commission for your review and approval. So I just wanted to highlight the fact we don't actually have a signed agreement with regards to that contribution yet at this time. I know that the task force is interested, and the city is also interested in sort of moving this along and paying for, and the MOU does provide that if the city wants to, it can procure the properties up front. At this time, the property owners were sent a letter saying, hey, we're looking at this, this is the area we're looking at, what are your thoughts with regards to your, initial, are you willing to sell the properties? And I believe this commission has discussed that. However, no formal offer has been made by the city. One thing I just wanted to share with you on behalf of staff, there is some concern that if the city were to purchase the properties prior to the DID raising the $2 million, that then the city would be responsible for as owners, responsible for the ongoing maintenance of those buildings until the town square development actually started. So that is not a plan for expense in the proposal. So it comes down to an issue of timing. So just wanted to make you aware of that. That doesn't stop you from, of course, making offers and setting when that closing might occur. It could be, it could be 30 days, 60 days, it could be 2 to 3 years. But I just wanted to raise that because that was expressed to me on behalf of city staff as a concern about responsibility that the city would be taking on.
Thank you, Ms. Murtha. I guess I'll start with some of just my looking at the price from the budget summary that JLG provided us with, and what the landowners provided us with, what they want for their properties. Personally, I am not comfortable buying buildings and then renovating buildings and then becoming a landlord. I don't think that's our responsibility as a city. I don't think we need to have a building, renovate it, and then try to find tenants. And that is one of the largest costs in this proposal. That is the north building. Right now, at what Mr. Marsh is looking at, in that general 300,000 or more, and you look at $700,000 on this budget summary for gutting and refurbing it, we'd have $1 million into a building, and then we're also a landlord. And I just am not comfortable spending that kind of money on that project. And I think there's a lot of things in this budget summary we seriously need to look at and maybe carve out of it. And at one point, we need to put a ceiling on this, what we are willing to spend. And this will be my last thought on this. I personally feel that we should get an appraisal on all three of these properties. and not make offers off of assessed value. So I'll open, that'll be it for my comments. Commissioners? Task force members, if you want to start first.
Mr. President, you know, I think I was under the impression that we'd be talking about negotiations, and kind of I see that this conversation is going a different direction, which is fine. I just have a few questions. You know, was anyone notified? We don't have, you know, I see Mr. Riesinger is here now, but was Mrs. Schwartz notified that we were going to be discussing this so that we could have representation from the DDA here, so that we did have questions, you know, stemming from this conversation, that there would be someone here to answer them? Because I think it's really hard for us to talk about the direction of this project without having members that have been a part of it from the beginning. And, you know, I think Commissioner Frederick and I sit on the task force, and unfortunately that leaves you guys out of a lot of those important conversations that are had. And I think maybe what would be best would be maybe doing a committee with maybe you, Mayor Decker, and Christy, and Mike as the chairman of the downtown task force, and, you know, Walter and a few other people, to sit down and hash out some of these things and concerns that you have that you haven't had the opportunity to discuss. Because I think you bring a lot of valid points, and I think Christy, you know, having been a part of this project since day one, could probably give you a lot of additional information that we haven't received yet, and maybe you guys could come to an agreement on a direction, especially with the changes that are currently going on with the Downtown Dickinson Association. I think it would be important to have those conversations before we move forward on any big decisions this evening.
Well, as you know, as a commission, it's tough for us to discuss this other than this kind of setting.
Right.
And we're not talking about, I'm not talking about offering. I want to know your thoughts on why are we going to buy a building, then renovate it and be a landlord? I just don't, you know, and that's part of the negotiation process. I mean, if maybe that building's left out, maybe that's not even part of what we're going to offer. Maybe that's something the DDA has to buy, and that's their responsibility to refurb it and run that building and run out of it. Maybe we just make an offer on 2 buildings.
I mean, the only thing, from my understanding, there's not much leasable space there. There's less than 1,500 square feet.
Yeah.
And the rest was storage and restrooms.
And again, we're going to spend $1 million on it.
Well, I think that was part of that was the demolition too, though.
Well,
the other ones.
Well, no, if you look here, it says North Building Gut and Remodel, $731,000. And if you take into consideration what they want for the property, $235,000 plus 20%, we're looking at $1 million. We want to have $1 million in a building that I personally don't see us as a city needing to be landlords and trying to recoup that $1 million. So maybe our negotiation, I mean, I'm not talking about offering anything right now. Maybe, and I want to hear your feelings, maybe we're only going to negotiate on 2 buildings.
Mr. President, I agree. That was the first number that struck me when I looked at that. It's an awful lot of money. And then to buy the other properties, and then what's it going to take to do everything to those properties. And I know we picked this as Site A, and that's the one everyone wants. But we can't discard Site B at this time when we're talking a $3 to $5 million project, and 60% of it is just getting the property in a buildable state. When we have property that will cost us nothing. It's not the site we want. It's a couple blocks away. It's not the site we want, but you can do an awful lot when you don't have to come up with another couple, $3 million. And, you know, eventually we're going to have to go into an executive session, whenever, and make an offer that we can live with for these properties. And if we can live with it, and they can't, then we move it. But we're sitting here, you know, and we haven't, nothing's been done since the last meeting, except we lost a good woman, Jennifer Strange, you know, so that's going to set them back a little bit, you know, so I agree with the mayor here. It's coming down to the dollars and cents here, and it's a lot of money. And some of it's just, you know.
Would you be opposed to getting a true appraisal?
I think, well, one point I want to make is Commissioner Frederick brought this up last time. Yes, that is a large sum, and I completely agree, and that was initially a red flag for me as well. However, if we were to move to Site B, Commissioner Frederick pointed out the cost that's going to be associated with building a structure on Site B that's probably going to be somewhere around the same price as demolition and remodel.
But do you need that building?
But you got the building.
But do you, I mean,
Depends
this
on
is,
the
this is why I want to.
programming and the points of the square. What are we trying to achieve by, you know, creating this?
I mean,
you're
you just brought up that it's only 1,500 square feet.
I mean, the rest was honestly, the rest was storage and the public restrooms were, I mean, according to the plan.
Right.
So, I mean, you're still going to have to build that.
Right. But again, if anything, I'm not opposed to Site A whatsoever. I just want, I think we need to have an appraisal done. It's worth us spending the money, even if the landowners don't agree to do a partial cost of that appraisal, which will benefit them in the long run anyway, an appraisal. But just so we can make a fair offer. I don't think we can just say assessed value plus 20%. And that, to me, is not doing our due diligence and looking at what the properties are really worth. And maybe they'll come in higher. Maybe it'll be the opposite, but then we'll know.
I would agree. I don't think necessarily throwing out random numbers is a good solution to acquiring property and
No.
percentages.
I think if we sit down with the owners and agree on a appraiser that we can both live with, I mean, I don't see why that should be a hindrance.
Can we get 3 appraisals done for $4,000?
I don't know. Commercial appraisers are pretty thin around here, so,
Yeah, but that's
I mean,
small building. I mean, there's.
I just wanted to offer you an option based on Commissioner Trustum's thought about or comment about getting the stakeholders together and talking and the limitations that you face because it is an open meeting. You could, if you wanted, have a special commission meeting that coincided with a task force meeting. So essentially, you're both meeting at the same time, and then you're free to have this discussion with all of the interested parties that have been talking about it, and that might, it could facilitate and move things along if it's something.
And I'm not opposed to that.
I have no opposition to that either. I just know that we get to one point and then we drop back 50 steps, and then we get to the next point and then we drop back 70 steps. We need to either move ahead or kill the deal or whatever we're going to do. So if it's meet, talk about an appraisal, get this MOU signed and find out why they're not signing it. We need to get the stuff ironed out like soon, or else we just can't keep revisiting this every meeting.
I mean, I would make that motion this evening that we get those appraisals done.
I agree.
I think that is number one. I definitely think we need to connect and figure out what's going on with the MOU. And I mean, as a task force member, I don't see the need to hold those meetings and take those people's time without constructive direction. And that's where we need to get.
I mean, Mr. Kessel was driving the bus, obviously. This was his project that he was really pushing to get done. We need to find out who that next person is going to be. I mean, so I think we all have the same goal, but we just need to get there. We just keep pushing it back and pushing it back, so.
Now let's get some appraisals done.
So we have a motion with a second to get appraisals.
I'll second it.
Okay.
With just some discussion, do we need, then, are we going to, is the city going to reach out to some appraisers? How are we going to do that?
if the motion is made tonight that the city wants to obtain appraisals, you can do it a couple of ways. You can say, direct city staff, bring us back proposals for appraisals, and we will then approve them. You can provide, you can also provide staff and say, obtain appraisals, but we want to cap the amount, and so you have the discretion to go out and just contract with a cap on the amount of what you want to pay, and so that, and then have them done, but then you lose the ability to see who's doing them and what the cost is. So there's two ways there, and the city, if it's made tonight, of course, without any discussion with the city will be incurring the cost and doing it irrespective of the wishes of the property owners.
Well, and then also, Mr. Frederick, you said that you wanted to have the discussion that it's an appraiser that they agree upon.
Well, if we don't, I mean, we're gonna have to get
Right.
them to give us access to the building,
So-
so, I mean, so, I think we need to talk to the landowners and say, we've agreed to get appraisals done, here's a list of appraisals, who can we agree on that we're both gonna be happy with? And then hire that person.
I agree. I think I appreciate the motion, but I think we need to go through that step first, to find where we can agree, and then come back.
I think we can make the motion this evening
Well, if,
and it can be contingent upon the discussions with property owners. Is that?
and you can, yeah, if you want to amend it and make it
Yeah.
contingent upon discussion.
I will.
And then we'll also have to, I mean, Mr. Frederick, because you're in that line of work, what do you think is a cap?
Just depends what scope we give them. I mean, they range. I mean, Mr. Geisler might charge a couple thousand per building. Mr. Ibach, if we hire him, might charge 5,000 per building. Depends on,
Okay.
it depends on the scope of the
Well,
work
maybe-
and
maybe we
the
don't-
appraiser,
Now,
so
maybe we don't put a cap on it right now, we just have the amended.
I would think we need to get a list of people that are even interested in appraising it, see if we can agree with the landowners, and then we can worry about the cost, I guess, after, but.
Mrs. Carlson, do we have, I suppose through Mr. Hirschfeld, we could attain a list of appraisers that he
Yes.
could contact, or he?
I believe that's very possible.
Okay. So if you could have him get us a list, and then if someone on the task force wants to approach the landowners and see if there's an appraiser that we can all agree to.
The chairman's in the audience. I don't know if you want to.
Well, I don't think he can make decision for the landowners, though.
But he can talk to them.
Okay.
Real estate agent.
Oh, yes, that's right.
I guess we have that option too.
I don't think Mr. Marsh had an agent, though.
He didn't have an agent, so I could reach out to him
Okay.
directly and then via the real estate agent.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that'll
Let's do that.
Okay. So we have a motion to get appraisals with consent of the landowners, and a second. Anyone opposed to that? Or have any comments or questions? If not, then we'll go ahead and vote. Mrs. Trustum?
Aye.
Mr. Frederick?
Aye.
Mr. Steiner?
All right,
Ms. Walla?
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Motion is approved. And I just think that's what we need to do to be appropriate.
I agree.
Make a legitimate offer to these landowners.
And I agree, because just the transparency thing, I mean, the assessed value is something we set in one of our departments of the city. At least we can say, well, this is what the market value is by this appraiser. And then they can't come back and say, well, we're not being fair.
Right.
So,
The next item on the any other comments?
Just on this particular one, if I can ask, the next task force meeting, I'm looking at Mr. Hadley again.
Scheduled yet, because we've been waiting, we're at a standstill until we have an idea of numbers, so.
After communications with the landowners, would it be appropriate then to try to schedule a joint commission task force meeting?
it'll have to be a special meeting, I would assume. Yeah, I would be fine.
Okay. Thank you.
And JLG.
Oh, yes, yes. And we'll make sure everyone knows it's a joint meeting, and it'd be great if they could attend and work out schedules.
Okay, then I guess I have this question, and just from what Mr. Hadley just said, that nothing, there's no meeting planned. So without us giving an offer, we're at a standstill?
Well, basically, what are we supposed to do?
Can't move forward and.
I mean, we don't know if the acquisition's gonna happen. And if it doesn't happen, then we have to go to Plan B. So until we actually know, until there's actually a direction, I mean, if the landowners say no to our offer, then what do we do? Then we're back dead in the water, so.
You know, and
I mean, that's where I'm saying we're stuck right now.
I think it,
But I would think that, I guess, maybe I'm confused at what you're sitting on and what the other downtown association, or what they're doing, because at one point, they have to raise $2 million. And if they're just waiting for this, and they're not moving forward with that, I'm concerned.
Mr. President, I was just going to mention that I think maybe if we could have Ms. Schwartz come in and give a presentation on the capital campaign, because they did have those booklets. They were waiting for the commission to secure the site. So since we approved Site A, we notified the public. I would assume that campaign is going to start soon.
Okay.
So maybe a presentation at the next meeting, or just contact with her for an update would be great.
Well, I mean, she could even come to the special, she'll be at the special meeting anyway,
Right.
so.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that would be appropriate.
It should be, well on its way, I would think.
Okay.
I would
All right.
think that they would have the ball rolling somewhat.
Right.
Okay. All right, any other discussion on Downtown Square? Okay, and we'll move to the Vite claim update, and Mrs. Murtha.
It's only a possible executive session, and
Only
that depends on you all. So the reason why it's possible is if you have any questions about the details of the case, we'd be happy to go into executive session and discuss it. And foreshadowing, there is actually a number 3 after this. I'm sorry, there was a report. I thought it was going to be earlier in the agenda, and Mr. Kraus is here. No, he left. I told him he could come. Just an update on the DEMCON contract for recycling. So I just wanted to give you that update. But with regards to the Vite, so there's I believe we mentioned at the last meeting, there's been they're contesting the city's resolution of a change order. I have been representing the city and would proceed, and indicate to the commission I would proceed to represent the city in this matter. Subsequent to our the last commission meeting, I then met with the executive team the next morning and indicated all of the things I would not be doing while I was representing the city in resolving this claim. So, for example, when I'm doing that, I would not be updating ordinances, and I would need contracts farther ahead of time if you want them removed to accommodate these changes. The response I received from the executive team was, I think, was overwhelmingly, and City Administrator Carlson can. You can ask her about that, but I believe the sentiment was, wait, we don't want you to stop doing those things, or we don't want to take more time to do those things. We would rather explore the options of retaining outside counsel so that the focus is still on these other items. So with that, both Mr. Kubis and myself had looked for firms. He had worked with an attorney previously on an arbitration when he was with KLJ, who we highly recommended. And so what we were looking for, and I've been in communication with the attorney that Vite has retained with regards to that, and we've been talking about how to proceed. So we'd be looking for the commission's thoughts and approval of would it be acceptable to you to look for outside counsel? City Administrator Carlson indicated, yes, there is money in the budget for retaining outside counsel for this matter. So I leave it to your direction. I can handle it. However, that would mean there will be other things I will not be doing while I'm doing that. So that's the reason for the request.
Commissioners, thoughts? I'm
fine with.
Personally, I think we need to retain outside counsel so that the normal flow of work can be maintained within the city, and we have it in our budget to bring this counsel on and arbitrate for us.
I would agree.
Agreed.
Thank you. With that direction, we will finalize representation and then bring back a retainer agreement at the next commission meeting.
Anything else, Mrs. Murtha?
Not on this one.
Okay.
Number 3?
Yeah.
Just wanted to let you know as a report that when apparently on the temporary contract, when Mr. Prouse and Ms. Schumacher were negotiating the terms, they for the temporary hauling agreement, they verbally negotiated the terms, and the owner didn't look at the final contract, which was approved. When he got it, he realized that one of the insurance provisions that we had in there, which is not, in my opinion, particularly concerning for a short-term contract, was not the type of insurance he had. And so the question was, can we, he had not yet signed it, can we amend the contract to take out that particular insurance term? So I just wanted to let you know that that was his request. I don't have any concerns or objection. Just highlight that for you so that a term is it's a stopgap insurance. And again, that's for a different insurance. The risk is minimal given the short term. So just want to let you know that's taken out, and the contract will be signed.
Stopgap is work comp comes in at a certain off of payment, and the court deems more than that. That's what your stopgap insurance would be for. I'm okay with the stopgap,
And then the only other, is that it, Mrs. Murtha?
It is.
Okay. Any questions from Mrs. Murtha on that? No. Okay, and then the only other thing that I've been contacted by Dr. Mitzel at DSU. He wanted to gauge or me to find out if there was, they are going to, and this is their property, so pretty much DSU's property, but they have right now practice grounds on right next to the indoor arena for their rodeo. They have a small practice ground there, and they just want to shift it over onto the grassy area to the west of that administrative building. It's already fenced, but they're going to put up an additional fence in there to run some of the rodeo practice. I checked with billing official Schwint, and it's, I just wanted to let commissioners know that that was their intention, to do that and move over there. And I think he's just kind of wanting to free up that 27 acres so we can get on that feasibility study, and maybe that would be a site selection. So, but just to let you know as commissioners that that was their intent. So.
Okay.
See coughing back there by, no, okay. That there is, so. But they are gonna, they have that practice, that little practice area now. They're gonna do the same. There'll be no competitions or anything there, just practice area for the horses. So. Yeah. Anything else from commissioners? All right, I'd look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We're adjourned.